The front door was still unlocked when Rowan Mercer pushed it open for the first time in 3 years, but nothing inside felt like home anymore. Dust floated through beams of afternoon sunlight, unopened mail lay scattered across the wooden floor, and every familiar object seemed to belong to a man who had disappeared long before the war finally let him come back. The medals folded inside his duffel bag suddenly felt heavier than the memories he had spent years trying to outrun. As he stood frozen in the silence, convinced that surviving had somehow become harder than fighting, a quiet voice drifted across the fence from the neighboring yard with a gentleness that nearly broke him. Someone simply told him that he didn't have to be alone today, and for the first time since returning, the walls around his heart began to crack. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. Rowan had imagined his return hundreds of times while serving overseas. Every version ended with relief, laughter, and a peaceful afternoon where life simply continued as though nothing had changed. Reality was painfully different. His parents had passed away within months of each other while he was deployed. His younger brother had moved across the country for work. Friends had slowly built lives that no longer revolved around waiting for someone who might never return. The little neighborhood outside the modest farmhouse looked almost identical, yet everything important had shifted without asking his permission. The war had taken years from him, but time had quietly taken everything else. Across the white fence lived Celeste Harper, a woman Rowan barely remembered from before he left. Back then she had been the cheerful school librarian who always seemed to have dirt on her gardening gloves and flour on her apron. Now she spent most afternoons tending flowers that stretched along the fence between their homes. She noticed Rowan before anyone else did. She noticed the way he flinched whenever a truck rumbled down the street. She noticed that groceries remained untouched on his porch until evening because walking into crowded stores overwhelmed him. Most of all, she noticed the loneliness that settled around him like an invisible storm cloud. She never overwhelmed him with questions or forced cheerful conversations. Instead, she simply lived kindly beside him. Some afternoons she waved while trimming roses. Other days she left fresh vegetables from her garden in a small basket near his porch with a handwritten note wishing him a peaceful day. Rowan rarely replied, but every gesture quietly chipped away at the isolation he believed he deserved. The hardest battles arrived in broad daylight. Bright sunshine reflecting off windows sometimes resembled distant flashes that instantly transported him back to terrifying moments overseas. The sharp crack of construction equipment made his muscles tense before his mind understood where he really was. Children laughing while playing in sprinklers reminded him of villages where laughter had disappeared overnight. He hated that ordinary happiness now frightened him. One afternoon Rowan wandered into the local grocery store, determined to prove he could function normally. The crowded aisles, clattering shopping carts, and overlapping conversations pressed against his senses until breathing itself became difficult. A stack of metal cans crashed nearby after a child accidentally bumped a display. The noise echoed through the building. Rowan instinctively dropped toward the floor, covering his head before realizing everyone was staring. Embarrassment overwhelmed him more than fear ever could. Without drawing attention to him, Celeste quietly stepped beside him. She happened to be shopping nearby and simply knelt beside him until he regained his breath. She never asked what happened. She never explained his reaction to curious strangers. She simply waited with calm patience until he stood again. Then she continued shopping beside him as though nothing unusual had happened at all. That small act of dignity stayed with Rowan for days. As summer afternoons stretched longer, they slowly began sharing cups of coffee on neighboring porches separated only by the old wooden fence. Rowan spoke little at first. Celeste understood silence better than most people because grief had already taught her its language. Years earlier she had lost her husband to a sudden illness, and although the pain never disappeared completely, she had learned that healing often began when someone simply stayed nearby without trying to fix everything. One warm afternoon she shared something Rowan never expected. She admitted that loneliness could become so familiar it almost convinced people they deserved nothing else. She confessed that after losing her husband, she had spent years smiling politely while secretly believing her happiest days had already ended. It wasn't dramatic or rehearsed. It was simply honest. For the first time since coming home, Rowan realized he wasn't the only person carrying invisible wounds. Days gradually turned into weeks. Together they repaired loose fence boards between their homes, planted fresh flowers, painted worn porch railings, and revived neglected gardens. None of those projects erased Rowan's nightmares, but each completed task reminded him he could still build something instead of merely surviving. Their growing friendship soon caught the attention of the neighborhood. Children began waving whenever Rowan walked outside. Elderly neighbors invited him to community picnics. A retired firefighter asked if Rowan would help coach a youth baseball team that desperately needed another volunteer. At first Rowan refused every invitation. Eventually, after gentle encouragement from Celeste, he agreed to help just once. Watching children chase baseballs across a sunny field changed something inside him. They didn't care about medals, military service, or painful memories. They simply saw a patient coach who encouraged them after every mistake and celebrated every small success. Rowan discovered that helping others left less room for the memories that haunted him. Months later, another unexpected challenge arrived. A former soldier from Rowan's unit named Graham unexpectedly visited. Graham looked exhausted, angry, and completely lost. Unlike Rowan, he had never asked for help after returning home. He had isolated himself until nearly everyone gave up trying to reach him. Seeing Graham was like looking into an alternate version of his own future. Instead of pretending everything was fine, Rowan invited Graham to spend the afternoon helping repair a weathered community center playground. They worked beneath bright skies, replacing broken boards and repainting faded benches while neighborhood families laughed nearby. Rowan never lectured Graham about healing because he knew healing couldn't be forced. He simply worked beside him, allowing purpose to replace silence. Celeste prepared sandwiches for everyone volunteering that afternoon. She treated Graham with the same quiet compassion she had once shown Rowan. No pity. No judgment. Just kindness. For the first time in months, Graham smiled. As autumn approached, Rowan received an official invitation to speak during a daytime community gathering honoring veterans. His first instinct was to decline. Standing before a crowd felt impossible. He feared his voice would fail or his memories would overwhelm him. Celeste gently reminded him that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage meant walking forward despite carrying it. The afternoon of the ceremony arrived beneath clear blue skies. Families gathered with folding chairs, children played nearby, and flags waved softly in the breeze. Rowan stepped onto the small outdoor stage with trembling hands. Instead of talking about battles or medals, he spoke about returning home. He described how survival didn't end when soldiers left the battlefield. Sometimes the hardest journey began after the uniform came off. He admitted that loneliness could quietly convince people they were forgotten. Then he spoke about neighbors who noticed pain without demanding explanations, communities that welcomed broken people without expecting perfection, and simple acts of kindness that slowly restored hope. By the time he finished, many people were wiping tears from their eyes. After the applause faded, dozens of veterans quietly approached him. Some thanked him for saying words they had never been able to speak themselves. Others admitted they had hidden their struggles from everyone they loved. Rowan realized his vulnerability had given others permission to stop pretending. Life didn't suddenly become perfect afterward. Some afternoons were still difficult. Certain memories still returned without warning. There were mornings when grief lingered longer than expected. But those moments no longer defined every day. One bright afternoon nearly a year after Rowan returned home, he and Celeste stood together beside the flourishing garden that now stretched across both yards. Flowers bloomed where neglected weeds once grew. Children rode bicycles past the houses, laughing freely beneath the afternoon sun. Graham arrived carrying supplies for another volunteer project. Several neighbors followed behind with homemade meals and fresh bread. Without anyone planning it, the quiet street had become a family built not by blood but by compassion. Rowan looked around and realized that home had never truly been a place waiting exactly as he left it. Home was something rebuilt through forgiveness, shared burdens, patient friendships, and ordinary people choosing kindness again and again. The war had changed him forever, but it hadn't stolen his future. It had simply made every act of hope more meaningful. Before we reach the end of this journey, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment telling us whether you believe one small act of kindness can change someone's entire life, or share a moment when another person's compassion helped you keep moving forward. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As the afternoon sun settled gently across the neighborhood, Rowan understood that healing was never about forgetting the past. It was about discovering that even after life's darkest chapters, the human heart could still choose compassion over bitterness, hope over despair, and love over loneliness. The scars would always remain, but so would the hands willing to help carry them. And in that simple truth, surrounded by people who refused to let him walk alone anymore, Rowan finally found the peace he had been searching for all along.